Washington's got a top 50 prospect coming to campus.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes with me over at Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKDOWNCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Lars, we got a really fun show coming at all the everydayers today, but just a quick reminder, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, make sure to click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video, and that subscribe button as well. Of course, it all really does help us out a lot. And if you're on the audio only side of things, leave us a 5-star review, as it all really does help us out, like I said. And Lars, today, we're going to spend some time on the recruiting trail. We're going to talk about Washington's ideal 2026 defensive line class. We're going to talk about some changes to the upcoming weekend of official visits, which includes Derek Colman-Brusa, who has rescheduled his visit. We'll tell you when a little bit later on, but the big news of the day is he's ranked number 40 overall on the 247 Sports page, is four-star prospect Salesi Moa. It's listed as an athlete. I believe he ends up playing safety if he does come to Washington, is set to come on an official visit this weekend.
One of the guys that was an original agenda guy. When we talked about safeties a couple of months ago, where you knew how big a fan I was when I watched the tape, and this is that Ryan Walters, Taylor Mays. Hey, we want to get a big safety. What is he? 6'3", 6'4"? Like he's big.
He's listed at 6'2", 175.
But plays the almost 6'3", 6'4". Just the way he comes down and hits, the way he's able to go sideline to sideline. That's that type of safety where you're just looking and saying, that's the headliner of the class. That's the big guy that you can hang your hat on and not have to worry about. You can figure out the rest as you go down, which we'll talk about, because the key was how many do you take. But at the top of that list is Salesi Moa.
So absolutely, where you talk about the headliner of this secondary class, right? Because you've got your big cornerstone piece in Cody Green now, and now it's just a matter of filling out a strong class around him, which is nice when you've got a 4-star running back in Ansu Sanoe, a 4-star quarterback in Derek Zammit. But building a strong secondary and building a strong group for Ryan Walters, John Richardson, Taylor Mays, that is really important. And Salesi Moa fills that really well, where I honestly didn't think there was much of a chance here, which is why you and I kind of let conversations about him take a back seat a while back, because he's got a bunch of official visits scheduled. I know Tennessee, Oklahoma, Michigan, and Utah. He's also taken one already to Michigan State, which came earlier in the month, because his brother is one of his older brothers plays outside linebacker for them, I believe. So it was one of those where, maybe there's a shot here, maybe not so much. And now seeing that there is some kind of opportunity here, this is really, really important, because we look at this class of what it could be in the secondary. You got 3 commits right now. You have CJ Lavender, friend of the program. You got Kasani Giles, and you have Elijah Durr. So now it's just a matter of, as you said, how many other guys you're going to take, because this is the kind of prospect where no matter what, if it's, hey, I'm going to wait to commit on signing day, you leave a spot open for him, because he is that level of talent. You find a way to make that work. And I look at this and I say, there are a bunch of really interesting names that Washington is in on alongside Salesi Moa. You talked about it. He's just a big, promising athlete who would fit really, really well on the back end of the defense. And it's a matter of, you got 4 or 5 guys now, maybe competing for 2 spots, because you have him. You've got Devon Benjamin, who you're still in on. I know he told Chad Simmons of on 3. He's going to end up taking an official visit here. You've got Jaron Jones from Mission Viejo in Southern California. And you've got Chase Calicut, who's visited twice now in the last couple of months and is also coming back up on an official visit.
And both Chase and Salesi have Michigan in their top list. And yeah. I think both are taking official visits to Michigan, at least have scheduled visits to Michigan.
That's right.
And so you just look at it and think, Washington seems to be in the same boat for some of these guys, like we talked about with Notre Dame and a couple of other positions where, okay, if so-and-so goes to Notre Dame, you have to think that helps Washington with Brian Bronner, for example, like that type of thing. So Chase Calicut goes to, let's call it Michigan, that helps Washington with Salesi. So I don't see a world, again, like where we talked about this off the show, where what we would do to get both, oh my God, we would move mountains, we would move earth. But you would do anything to get that in a realistic sense that you're probably getting one of the two. And so in that realm, if you can get Salesi to commit early, because he's got a bunch of other officials going between May and June, if you can make a serious impact and say, you know what, we're going to shut it down now, that could just end all the discussion right now. And I think that would be a perfect way for Washington to do that, where you can look and say, hey, we like these other guys, but if you want to jump in the boat right now, let's do it, because that makes everything easier.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I feel like that's a best case scenario sort of thing. Like,
yeah.
We look at this right now, and the more important thing here is, we list all those guys off, and it's you want elite guys competing to take these spots. You want these top end talents that you look at and you evaluate, and you get some really exciting guys in the class early on, right? Like CJ Lavender, Elijah Dirk, Kasani Giles. Again, I just want to make sure those names are mentioned, because this coaching staff is very, very high on them, and that's why they took them so early in the process. Now you look at it and it's, okay, there's still a spot for, Jaron Jones on the outside, who you really like. And it's just a really exciting, I've talked about him a lot over the last couple of weeks. It's just a big, exciting press corner who fits really, really well into what John Richardson likes to do. And it's, we still want to make sure we have a spot open if that guy wants to commit. But, Devon Benjamin is also out there as well. And Salesi Moa kind of falls into that boat where I want to be very clear. I don't think that Washington is by any means the favorite in this conversation, but this is where it gets really interesting for me, Lars, because I look at all this and I say, I'm just so intrigued as to what this recruiting pitch looks like, because now we've seen it pay off in recent weeks, right? With flipping Cody Green away from Oregon. And now it's, okay, who is next on that list? We're going to talk about Derek Colman-Brusa in a little while, where I think that no matter what rankings are, that's the kind of guy right now where every single Washington fan is pointing at him and saying, hey, that's the number one guy that we want to see commit in this class. But no matter what, no matter how the coaching staff has arranged their board, seeing that Salesi Moa, one of these guys who is so highly coveted around the country, is now looking at Washington after setting all his trips and saying, no, I want to make sure I get up there for an official visit. That speaks volumes to Ryan Walters, to Taylor Mays, to John Richardson, to everybody in the recruiting office as well, and to Jedd Fisch, to say, look at what these guys are doing to make sure that they are getting elite recruits to come on campus.
And you and I both know this. When recruits come on campus, that's when things seem to change, where a lot of recruits come up and it's like, I didn't know a ton about Washington, and then that visit blew me away. And it's not the stars and stripes, it's not the flash and whatever, it's the location, it's seeing the lake, seeing the stadium, going out and doing that. It's coming when you come all the way out to Seattle, especially for these guys that either live in Utah, Oklahoma, even go further west, like Derek Zammit from New Jersey, you have a new appreciation for it. And that seems to be when Washington makes the most amount of ground, where if the fact that you can get the visit scheduled is one thing, it almost seems to think like once you get on campus, they have a hard time not coming back. And we've seen that with multiple guys where it's, hey, I came up for an unofficial. Now let me come up for one more unofficial. And you start to have an attraction. And so it's not just about the pitch. It's almost about kind of just like the experience. Where again, part of it absolutely is the pitch. But I think the pitch is you're going to get produced by Taylor Mays. We have a pretty well open, Ryland Dillard Allen, and you have Alex McLaughlin, maybe a handful of others at safety. But the competition is wide open next spring at safety if you think about it. And so that's probably part of the pitch as well. But a lot of it is like, hey, stay closer to home, stay on the West Coast. You don't have to go all the way up to Michigan. We're in the Big Ten. You can do all this and be the guy at safety. I mean, the pitch is right there, but it's also about just, hey, come experience campus. If you don't know about Seattle, if you don't think you might fit in Seattle, just come and try it. Yeah. You'd be surprised. And I think Salesi kind of falls into that boat of, wow, man, it's beautiful up there. Like, let me go check it out. And now that I've been experiencing it, it's like, ooh, Washington's higher on my list than I thought. Again, I'm with you in terms of I wouldn't say they're the leader by any stretch of the imagination, but it seems kind of like almost in that Denarius Gray word. Once you get him on campus, now he's going to start thinking even more. And it's one thing to get him on campus, but once you do, that's where they really seem to make the separation.
Lars, let's jump into who's going to be visiting alongside Salesi Moa this weekend. Right after a message from our friends over at Amazon Fire TV. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick, 4K devices, no console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to go. Dive into hundreds of premium titles, including EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty, as easily as you stream your favorite shows. What if you could jump into your favorite Xbox titles without needing your console in every room of the house? I would have so much fun with that. I'd be taking it. I'd be sitting back here recording the show, and I would probably just, be simulating my CFB 25 dynasty. That'd be so much fun for me. Head to Amazon.com/FireTV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, and Fire TV Cube. So, Lars, as we look at the rest of this visit weekend, it's changed a lot. 4-star tight end Camden Jensen has taken his name off the list. Doesn't look like he's going to be visiting Washington at this time. David Schwerzel and Colman-Brusa have both rescheduled their visits. We'll get to that in a minute, because right now the only official visitor, there are going to be plenty of unofficial visitors, including, I believe, David Schwerzel and a bunch of other guys from the area in class of 27, class of 28, is Tyson Bacon, a 4-star defensive lineman from Alabama who was committed to Tennessee, but has since backed off of that.
And that's the intriguing one, where obviously, like you mentioned, you're going to have other guys on campus, but it's the fact that you're getting a kid from Hoover, Alabama, a defensive lineman from Hoover, Alabama. Shout out Two A Days, Rush Pro, saw that back in the day. Love that show on MTV. But honestly, that was such a fun show. But you just look at it, and again, we've said it probably 10 million times on the show, but it goes back to the line that Matt Doherty gave us, where just that region of the country, where whether he's a 3-star, 4-star, 5-star, he's got the projectable body, I believe, 6'3", 263 is what he's listed at on 247. And you look at it, was committed to, and when we thought about when he was committed to Tennessee, it was like, I don't know if that's a guy you're going to be able to flip. Now, potentially, it's not a flip. Although I will say I saw a graphic this week that said it was a quarterback that flipped, and I was like, that's not a flip. That was a 5-month delayed flip, if we're calling that a flip. But in the same realm of, you're still getting a kid who was on an SEC board, still coveted by plenty of schools. So this isn't and this is, again, no slight, but you're not taking like a developmental Caleb Smith where you're looking and thinking, hey, 2-3 years down the line, this is going to work out. You're looking at Tyson Bacon thinking, hey, that's a big guy where we might see him not next year, but redshirt freshman getting in some games, and then you work in that realm. Because again, we're talking about stacking the D line, which we'll probably get more to in the third segment. But just anytime you can take a body from that region of the country who's interested, you almost kind of have to do it.
Oh, absolutely. That is such an important thing, especially for Washington, as we've heard Jedd Fisch talk about with the expanded recruiting footprint. We've talked about that so much on this show, but this is one of those ones where it's very similar to what you were talking about a little earlier on, when getting guys on campus, all of a sudden it's, oh, wow, yeah, that made a really big impression on me. I want to find a way to get back up there. And this is one of those that falls into that mold perfectly, where his other visits that he has scheduled are Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and Florida. So it's the SEC and then Washington. So there's a lot to dive into there that I think is very interesting, because it's not even just, hey, Washington was able to get an official visit out of this kid who's committed to Tennessee from Alabama, which is not something I feel like you and I have ever seen outside of Caleb Smith last year, and he wasn't committed to Tennessee.
Reuben Foster.
Yes. I knew there was one, but I wiped that one out of my memory for obvious reasons. But outside of that, I look at that and I say this is just a testament to the coaching staff, like we talked about a little while ago, and being able to sell what Washington is. And it's a fun weekend to have guys that maybe haven't been here before up here. When you talk about the Windermere Cup and some of the other just fun Seattle things that are going to be going on, that it's going to be really cool to sell that to those guys when, they show up for the spring game and you see all the boats lined up on the water right outside the stadium. All of that is going to be really just fun and unique, I believe, for Tyson Bacon, for Salesi Moa to be able to see. And selling that is going to be just interesting as we get into what's going to be a really big defensive line class. And we hinted at it. We need to talk about him. It's Colman-Brusa, where he was supposed to come up on an official visit this weekend, and he has now postponed that to May 30th. And I think that's a really nice weekend for him to end up coming up here, because it's going to be a really important weekend. We'll talk about a couple other guys that are going to be on that visit weekend a little later on. But I look at that and I say, I'm sure there's some people that see that he's no longer on the schedule for this weekend and say, oh no, I don't think this is a good sign. But I would say the opposite, where having him come on campus alongside other UW commits is going to be really important. And it's also something that I know he's talked about a lot, is he wants to be around a strong recruiting class, and seeing who else might be a part of that instead of making a weekend all about him, in a sense, is probably really beneficial for Washington in the long run.
No, I completely agree. And the other reason why I wouldn't be concerned is when you look at the rest of his visits, his visit to Washington was his first. Everything else was going to come after that. And there was almost a significant gulf between the Washington visit and then 2 weeks later he was going to take a visit to UCLA. So now it's a sense of UCLA visit comes first, then Washington, and then do you take the rest of them is the question, because in a way, now that you're going to – and I also like it because as great of a recruiting style as the spring game is and all that, when you have kids on campus for 48 hours and you have no distractions, that is honestly the best time, because I know you and I have talked to recruits and parents about this, where coming in on a game day visit, not saying the spring game is a game day, but just, anytime you can come in when there's something else happening, the coaches don't have as much ability to have one-on-one FaceTime, don't have the ability to build those relationships as strongly as you do on a May 30th weekend, where you guarantee the weekend is the weather's probably going to be great, 60s, 70s.
It should be great this weekend too.
No, and it should, but I'm just saying, the further you get into the summer, we both know how Seattle cooks in the summer. But with that being said, you look at it and think the later it goes, it's actually better because you're still fresher in the mind. You don't waste the visit right now and say, hey, come back for an unofficial this weekend since you don't have an official schedule with the other big guys that we have on campus. No, you don't need to make it all about Derek, because I think Derek is well aware of how badly Washington wants him. You don't need to be like, oh, hey, we're going to bring the local kid in for this one and make it a huge thing about him. I want, like you mentioned it perfectly. It's not about Derek. It's about who's around Derek. For Washington, it's about getting Derek, but it's also about getting the kids around him. And when you look at that weekend that you mentioned, you got plenty of 3 and 4 stars, Anthony Jones. Just go down the list of guys that are coming up with him, and that's a perfect weekend for Derek to look around and be like, I've been on campus a bunch. And because he came up for the junior day and was like, yeah, plenty of other talent around me, come up again, more talent around me, come up again. And so now you're showing Derek on 3 or 4 visit occasions that you can stack a bunch of recruits around him and not just say, and it's not just stacking recruits in the sense of, hey guys, we need you to come in just because we're trying to make it look good for this other kids. Like, these other kids are just as coveted by Washington. And so it's a good thing for Derek to see, wow, you like Washington? Wow, okay. I'm the only one who, oh yeah, let's do it. Let's make it official. Like, it's not that Derek doesn't like Washington. It's I just want to make sure everybody else around me is bought in equally, because it's one thing to be a kid from the state and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to be the hallmark, be the guy that puts the plants the flag sort of thing. But it shouldn't be all about Derek, because he's the highlight of the class. But you would ask Derek, he's like, yeah, but I need other help around me. I want to be on a great team. I want to make the playoffs. I don't want to have 17 sacks or get triple teamed every time because I'm the only guy that's being focused on.
Right, and that's a really good point, because that's such a big part of it. And I want to just kind of harken that back to the overarching thing of the last week now, which has been Cody Green committing to Washington. And flipping him away from Oregon is such a massive win in that right as well. But it also almost feels like that's something that will help Washington when you look at just not only that Cody is from the state, like we talked about a little bit right after Cody committed, but the fact that whatever that pitch that Oregon made clearly wasn't nearly as effective long-term, where I think that that's something that you can really look at and say, maybe, for some kids, that flash of Oregon is very effective up front, and it'll get them to commit and it'll get them to do whatever else. But then I look at just Derek, and I know you've talked to his family a little bit more than I have, but you talk to just his family and what they really value when it comes to the recruiting trail. That's one of the reasons they've been so interested in Ohio State, is they know what that program does to develop defensive linemen, especially long-term. And that's why I've always kind of considered them to be a little bit more of a threat to Washington than Oregon on the recruiting trail when it comes to Derek in particular. And now I just kind of look at the way that the pendulum is swung back towards Washington by flipping Cody Green and by saying, yes, we can just outduel Oregon for the top recruits on the West Coast at premium positions. And I say that that's something that could certainly end up impacting Derek as well, because getting just all those guys that are from the Northwest to stay together up here and build something in Washington is something that, I'm sure a lot of the guys in the area, whether it be Jake Crawford, the director of player personnel, director of recruiting Marcus Griffin, all these other people just in the building behind Jedd Fisch that aren't just the on-field coaches are focusing on.
Yeah, and I think it just gets down to, we know what the goal is with Derek. It's just a matter of, and that's why it's not a matter of when, it's just build that relationship, build that chemistry, build that connection. And it really seems like, between Ryan Walters, all the new Aaron Van Horn, all the new guys that have kind of come into their official positions, really have made up all the ground. And I think you look at it like it's not why not Washington. It's not why Washington's why not Washington now at this point. Because it used to be why Washington. Now it's why not Washington. We talked about like Cody Green. You checked all the boxes. Derek, the exact same way.
Lars, we got to get into talking about David Schwerzel a little bit because he is a big part of Washington's ideal 2026 defensive line class. And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKDOWNCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKDOWNCollege for half off your first year. So, Lars, I look at David Schwerzel, who we didn't get a chance to talk about just a minute ago. So we wanted to kind of make sure we saved him for this because we know Derek Colman-Brusa is a huge part of Washington's ideal 2026 defensive line class. So we didn't necessarily need to have that discussion because it's a little more obvious, right? I look at David Schwerzel, who's starting to get some interest from Notre Dame, who has rescheduled his official visit from this weekend. He hasn't set a new date just yet, but I bet it'd be somewhere in late May, early June. And I say this is another guy, along with his teammate Fasiale, that are really important building blocks of Washington's 2026 defensive line class.
Oh, I agree, and I think the Notre Dame offer is so intriguing because it given how late in the process, air quotes for the audio listeners, air quotes around late, because it is only April, May, and you think about it where, okay, does that mean now that he pushes his timeline back a little bit? Did the official visit stretch into, the fall? Or does he, kind of just say, what? Because there's, when we talked about this a couple of months ago, we brought it up before the show, where it seemed like as much as you want to keep all the in-state guys, especially the 2-day D-line duo, you look at it and think, that might be hard to pull off. And so that's where David Schwerzel kind of becomes the enigma in the room, where can you convince him to stay, or does he want to blaze his own path and go to Notre Dame or somewhere else, where you think like it's an intriguing sell where, like you mentioned, where he didn't reset his official visit. I'm assuming he will at least, but that's the one that intrigues me the most because we've seen FA a lot of practice, and we've seen, a lot of these guys at practice, and it's just, what's kind of the missing link? There's no harm in it if he wants to go out and, kind of blaze his own path, but it almost just seems like it always sense like one of those two guys is kind of going to do their own thing. But if you can at least get the first one in, then you can start pulling on the other one and say, hey, FA is committed. David, maybe you're next. And then a bit of Derek commits in between that. And then you're looking at like, hey, you want to round out this group? We can keep the Washington trio home. And then so that you kind of just build on that sell.
So I like where you're going with that. I want to build on it in terms of what it could look like in California, because Washington is in on so many top flight defensive linemen where there's going to be a point where somebody might end up getting left out. And I don't want to, say, oh, this is the odd man out for whatever reason. But because I look at, Landon Barnes in Texas, and I say, if you're able to reel in that kid who's going to be coming up later this month for an official, that's a really nice win. But you also have to try to find a way to pair him with, Anthony Jones at Crean Lutheran and Kari Wilder at Sarah, where those are two guys who I think Kari Wilder is probably the number 2 priority, in my opinion, right now, behind Derek Colman-Brusa, because he's just that big physical. We got a chance to see him he was on an unofficial visit during practice about a week or so ago. And he's got that frame that can play inside and out, which is why Fasiale and David Schwerzel are so important, because they have that sort of frame as well. And Derek Colman-Brusa does to an extent as well. I just think he'd be a really fun, just straight up big physical, everything you need him to be on the edge by itself, especially if you want to take so many guys in this class. So I look at Anthony Jones and I look at Kari Wilder and I say, those are two guys that you need to find a spot for in this class. And the more I look at them, I say, if you want to find a way to take Landon Barnes, more power to you. You find a way to do that. But then there are some questions you need to answer on the interior. But for the moment, let's stick on the edge because we can get to that in a minute.
I was gonna say like yeah, because the key in that is where we talked about the edge position. You can take what 4 or 5 potentially, 3,
Sure.
4, 5, and so when you go down that list, it's how do you kind of stagger that progression out? Where if you're gonna, what we saw with the receiver position, you can take 5, but then you got to figure out how do you separate that, divide that class into 3 and 2 or 2 and 3. But that's the good problem to have, where you're talking about if you're sorting out between.
One thing I just want to mention on that is I think you make a good point where you can find a way to divide it. But that's not on the coaches to do. That's on the players. The players will come and show you how ready they are for that moment. And then that it's the reason that you want to stack classes and you want to take as many of these big talented prospects that you like as you can in the same class, because once they all come on campus, you will find a way to figure that out on the field.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So that's why it's a good problem to have, where you're not looking like, oh, maybe we need to go with this guy or this guy because he can do that. It's just let them figure it out. You phrased it perfectly, but that took the words right out of my mouth. Where it's that's exactly what you want to do, where you can project as much as you want and think, oh, this guy will fit like this, Wilder will fit like that. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But the only way you find that out is convince them, get them on campus, sign, put them in practice, and then let them figure it out in the scheme on the field. But that's why you're going and targeting all these guys. So when we talk about, I don't know, do you choose one or the other? It's not Washington choosing. It's put yourself in the position to where no matter what the kids choose, you are going to be okay. The staff and Washington are going to be fine, because you're not going to miss on all your elite targets. You're going to find at least 3 or 4 of them. And then it's just a matter of how can you coach and develop those guys. So it's a good problem to have, but it's not a problem that the coaches are going to figure out. It's a problem that the players are going to figure out.
Absolutely. Where let's transition this conversation to the interior for the last few minutes here, where I have some questions because I think we know who the top targets are, right? Where T.I. Umukai certainly seems to be one of those. And then Dakota Dixon seems to be that second guy, where I look at Dakota Dixon, I think he's a really nice developmental piece. And depending how that turnover works on the defensive line this year, where you've got a bunch of guys that end up graduating, whether it be Ontario Thompson, Logan Sagapolu, Simone Peppa, those are all guys that seem to be on their way out after the season in terms of eligibility. Maybe you have 1 or 2 other ones that transfer if they're not getting the playing time they're looking for, whatever that might be. You might need to reload at that spot again. So I'm kind of curious to see what they're going to do if they need more than one guy, because I'm of the mind that T.I. Umukai is the caliber of player that can come in and find a way to contribute right away. But I look at Dakota Dixon and I say, I like where he's at long-term. I've heard from a couple of different recruiting members and different staffs around the country that have told me similar things with Dakota, but he might need a redshirt year to just really continue to refine his body and just develop a little more explosiveness, a couple other things where long-term, he's a really fun prospect. But you might need to go find one more guy. And that's where I'm really curious as to how this is going to work, where it's, do you take an Anthony Jones or a Kari Wilder and say, hey, we're going to move one of you guys inside for the majority of your reps and see how that plays out? Or do you go out and you try to, flip somebody away from XY school? It doesn't matter right now because there really isn't a clear and defined target in my mind. Or do you just really go out and take a big swing on somebody like Vodney Cleveland in Alabama? Like there are a whole bunch of different ways that you could do this. And I'm of the mind that from what we've seen the staff do so far, that they're going to try to identify a flip somewhere. And I really don't think that person would be Bob Militalo.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't classify Bot in this category, even though we've had the discussion before. But going back to T.I., I mean, it just, when you say like you take 1 or 2, if you take T.I., you can call him 2 bodies because like his size, like he takes up and has the production of 2 bodies. So for me, that's fine. It takes me back to the old T.I. song, "Big Things Popping." Just put him on the line and let him pop. But like in that realm, you think about like, I'm not worried about the flip side of that because I think they're in a really good position with T.I. Umukai. So I'm not necessarily worried about needing to find someone to flip. And if you do, that's after you would get a guy like T.I. or somebody else in the fold. And then you're just going and looking for that next one guy so you can put all the resources there, all the energy in there, knowing you have the other position secured. And that one honestly can come in the fall. That one seems to me like, because I agree with you where it would be a flip. but it's almost one where, let's say Washington is 6-2. Call it in the middle of October. Let's just go. Don't ask me which 2 wins or 2 losses they are, but just when you get to that point, now you're going to be probably a top 25 team, and then you're on radars of kids that at this time in the year right now you're not on, and the kids are thinking, hey, like, I'm not really interested in Washington. Oh wow, like look at Ryan Walters' defense at Washington. Look at what Jedd Fisch is doing up there. Maybe I should consider it. That's when I think that is gonna come into play.
No, that's a really good point, and that's something that, we kind of saw come to fruition last year, where it was Donovan Olubade and Andrew Marsh. And obviously those didn't come to fruition. And maybe some of that had to do with early playing time, had to do with a bunch of different things, with how many players were in those classes. But you look at it, and if you're able to take that step forward that you're looking for this season, I'm feeling that maybe we see that at multiple positions, where defensive line is the one that you and I want to talk about because that's the most critical. And we'll see just how a couple of the other positions work out, whether it be offensive line, right? Like, are you able to get Sam Utu to pair with Cody Green and one of Dominic Harris or Aaron Thomas? Maybe you fill that group out, but maybe you aren't able to, and say Aaron Thomas goes to Florida State and play where his dad did. There are a whole bunch of different ways where all of a sudden, and again, I just use that as an example, where as we kind of get down the line, Washington has an opportunity to really make a name for itself in this 2025 season. And a lot of that is going to just not only impact the 26 class, but beyond. As we see Jedd Fisch and this coaching staff continue to try to just expand their recruiting footprint, to try to dip more into the South, to get more into, the Midwest and out onto the East Coast, like they did with Derek Zammit. There are a whole lot of different possibilities. And now, outside of selling this class, which would be a really great start, if you can do that by the time the season starts, winning this fall would go a long way. Being here. Thank you for everybody who's tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the offseason. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Well, that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please, if it's a 5-star reviews, it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Friday.